Gentlemen, welcome to another video on the Longevity Strength Coach channel. My name is Paul Green, and in today's video we are going into an effective framework in which you can use to develop your aerobic fitness, your aerobic endurance. Basically, safely adding miles into your weekly tank in order to get you from where you are now and where you want to be in the future. This framework is what I use when I trained people like yourself to become paratroopers. So, a lot to get through today. It's going to be a good one. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Paul Green. There I am there at ITC Catterick, and I'm a former Special Forces Support Group operator and British paratrooper and a PTI. Trained loads of like these elite units across British Defence, including Royal Marines, paratroopers and the RAF. I've seen the difference between the three, arguably the best three units in the British Army, and the Royal Marine has a bit more of a stronger, robust frame. The paratrooper is a bit faster, and the RAF is like kind of a blend between the two. You'd be kidding yourself if you thought that these units were not hugely aerobic and hugely endurance machines. Most of their job requires great demands on endurance. Putting kit on their back, walking for miles, running for miles, getting heavy kit and equipment out of certain situations for miles. Just doing tasks, for hours and hours on end to a high standard. It requires a lot of endurance. And the modern army nowadays will tell you that the current athlete, the current soldier, is a more well-rounded, a more balanced individual. It's not true. Paratroopers are endurance machines, and I've trained them for 5 years in the recruiting space. So yeah, what I say today will be from my past experience. Nowadays, I'm full-time online.
Your tired body.
That's an ND. And I run the Longevity Program, which is a strength conditioning service laser focused for men over the age of 40 from different extreme sporting backgrounds. Martial artists, Muay Thai, grapplers, rock climbers, skydivers, mountain bikers, skateboarders and free runners. Anyway, this is what we've got to get through today. The plan, we're going to talk about weekly mileage, is the main thing. It's not about speed. We're going to delve into these a little bit later on. Conducting an aerobic assessment, the importance of that. Never skipping weekly strength sessions. 80% of your mileage should be slow and steady, at singing pace I like to call this, or heart rate dependent, zone 2 for those nerds out there. 20% of your session should be absolutely relentlessly fast. You should increase your mileage week by week by no more than 10% per week. This is the endurance progressive overload. You should have deload weeks and allow your body, your muscles and your bones to just recuperate, your CNS as well, just to recuperate from your sessions. And we'll talk about carbs as well. So if that sounds like something that you would find useful, then I may ask. This video is going to take about 20 minutes. I've got 16 slides to get through, so stick around if you think this will be useful to you, and happy days. Straight into it. Right, just a disclaimer, right? So when I trained recruits that were aspiring to join the Paratrooper Regiment, they had a 20-week time frame to get from session 1 on the area was a 3-miler, right? And then in 20 weeks, I needed to get them to a standard of a 10 to a 20-miler while wearing kit and equipment. This is an extremely short time frame, is the point I'm making. And with that extremely short time frame comes huge risk. And the amount of people that get injured on this course is ridiculous. It's simple as that. Some of my close mates got injured on the course. When you have endurance related goals, give yourself a big time frame. If it's possible to get somebody from 0 to paratrooper, the standard of a physical standard of a paratrooper, I'm not saying the soldiering level, the professional, the behavioural standard of a paratrooper, obviously that takes years to get to, but the physical standard of a paratrooper requires a little bit of this. I can get people there in 20 weeks with huge risk, and I've been in that space for like 3 years, from like 2018, 2019 and 2020. Yeah. Give yourself plenty of time. Give yourself way over 20 weeks. Give yourself 40 weeks. Do it right. Take your time, because every session I'm pushing the pace in order to get them to the right standard. You shouldn't be in that place. It's too much pressure. It's unnecessary. It's unnecessary risk on your body. And there's too many people nowadays that, I want to do a half marathon. I want to do a marathon next summer. Panic. Every session's panic. And this is what happens. High risk. So bear that in mind. Okay. So that said, right, the gold standard would be track your weekly mileage conducted, not the speed. Obviously, me in that space, I had to track the speed as well because they were on such a crazy time limit. The army hasn't got all the money in the world to pay for 40-week training packages. They literally say, you've got 20 weeks, get them at that standard. And the repercussions of that is, a pretty high injury rate, even though the PTIs there are absolutely all over it and they do all they can to mitigate, unnecessary injuries. So, this is different from what people would usually approach their endurance training. They would track the speed in which they run, they would track their mileage, and they would try and improve their speed every single session and their mileage every single session. Don't worry about it, honestly. This is a hard thing to do, and it takes practice, right? It's basically saying the most important thing is your weekly mileage. The most important thing is your body's ability to get to a certain standard, which is half marathon, marathon. You just need to get to that standard first and foremost without any injuries. And that comes from basically a progressive increase of your weekly mileage. Once you are at that standard, you would no longer increase your weekly mileage. Then you would do more speed sessions to bring your speed up a little bit. Anyway, I'll get more into that in a bit. Hopefully you appreciate the point that I'm making. This doesn't matter for most of your sessions. Next one. It's very important that you assess where you're currently at, and you can do this by means of an aerobic assessment. Get yourself out, do a 5k or a 2k run, best effort, get your time down. And when you shift focus from speed, most of your sessions will be pretty chilled out. When you see these times go down, the more and more you focus on just volume. When I class aerobic fitness as volume, because those that are absolute specialists in aerobic fitness generally have just done the most volume. So make sure you do an assessment, and this will kind of gauge your first session. So if you're not at the level of where you can do a 5k run without stopping, then you do a 2k run best effort. And you just absolutely go crazy, happy days, get your time down, write it down, and then your first session will probably be about this sort of distance. Does that make sense? So there's the assessment, right? And this is obviously longevity program. Those of you that are runners, right, and there's a misconception on my channel that I am just the strength guy, go in the gym, do all these sports. Trust me, right, aerobic endurance and endurance sports, ultra marathons, they are some of the most mentally demanding, psychologically demanding sports, probably the most psychologically demanding sport on the planet. I have a huge admiration for people that do them. But people that do them well never skip their strength sessions. And it comes down to how many available slots you have per week. But if you only have one available slot per week, you best make sure that you are doing a one full body training session, which, prioritizes full range of motion of the joints, prioritizes a good amount of intensity, and, doing the techniques to a really good standard, or as good of a standard as you can. Because the misconception in the endurance world is weight training is going to make you slower. Look, if you do not do weight training and you have endurance related goals, half marathon, 3 months, 4 months down the line, you've got shin splints, you've got patellar tendonitis, you're just an idiot. So just keep them in, right? And you can look to reduce them maybe for the last month, but get them in at the start of your training block. Do you know what I mean? And then, I don't know, the last 6 weeks you can take them out when you're pretty much there on your mileage. Does that make sense? So in Power Depot, the first 6 weeks of the training program for the recruits, the Joes, is heavily strength based, and you can almost argue that it might not even do anything. But the saving grace is when we get them on the training area, we can actually use the hills as specific running strength sessions, and we can actually say that when we do shorter distances with weight on our back, they could class as strength as well. Do you know what I mean? When it's extremely short distance, and you could class track sessions as running strength. However, I'm not going to get complicated into that. I'm just saying the recruits in the Paras do not skip their strength sessions. They're doing it, and it's the reason why that strength then gets converted into endurance later on down the line, and it helps keep their joints and muscles more resilient and reducing the risk of injuries. How many of you have got injured when you have had aspirations, endurance aspirations? Let me know in the comments. Right, there is something that floats around the endurance world. It's a very popular term. If you haven't heard it, then I'm glad to introduce it to you. It's called the 80-20 rule, 80%, 20% rule, which states that 80% of your volume, 80% of your basically running training, cycling training, whatever it may be, needs to be slow and steady. And the reason why is because the idea is you need to improve your aerobic base. And in order to do so, you need to do a maximum amount of volume that you can recover from. If you went too fast, the next day would be of a less quality. So the idea behind it is to increase the amount of quality that you are doing. And over a large period of time, you will have accumulated so much time at an elevated heart rate, training the aerobic energy system. And 20% of your volume needs to be hard, fast and aggressive. If you were to just do chilled out runs all the time, your VO2 max wouldn't really improve. Yeah, of course, if you're getting yourself out on a run, you've got a running goal, and you want to do a half marathon, you want to do a marathon, the first 4 weeks, first 6 weeks, maybe the first 2 months, you're probably going to improve your VO2 max if you live by this rule. But this just ensures that you're actually improving your VO2 max. Them two work hand in hand. You've got VO2 max, which is more probably aerobic power, and then you've got this, which is aerobic capacity. If your body has an extremely efficient way of processing oxygen into energy to fuel the cells, if it just does that extremely effectively, the faster you run over months, the faster you run, you will still remain in that aerobic state. Do you know what I mean? Your body won't panic and go into fight or flight. It will still remain in that aerobic state. So it increases your capacity. Your previous capacity, where you were running up the stairs, you'll still be in an aerobic state. So, poor example, by the way. Anyway, how do you know that it's slow and steady? You use a heart rate monitor, or you use RP, which is rate of perceived exertion. What I like to suggest for those that haven't got heart rate monitors, it's not the greatest means, but some people like to do it off feel. Some people, there's pros and cons of using heart rate monitors. There's pros and cons of using RPE. Heart rate monitors, sometimes you have a coffee, your heart rate's elevated. So some people like using both, but I always prefer the data rather than feelings. So heart rate monitor, and basically your heart rate goes zone 1 where you're at rest, zone 2 where you're a little bit elevated, zone 3, zone 4, zone 5 where you're maxing out. And that's the scale. It's a 1 to 5 scale. In RPE, right, so how do you perceive your current exertion levels is basically what that is. And what I like to do with this, for people that haven't got heart rate monitors on, but I'm trying to keep them in these zones, I just say, there's talking pace, yeah, but people talk and walk and they're happy to be out of breath. What I say to them, as I say, singing pace. Run at a pace in which you can comfortably sing. And then they're like, and that properly calms them down. And yeah, this is slow and steady. It's very hard to do, it takes a lot of practice. So we'll leave that there for now. Jesus Christ, I'm already on 16 minutes. So I'm going to go on to previous world record holder. Just a little clip from one of his videos where he's talking about tempo training, which is the 80% stuff.
The tempo session is very important for an athlete because it's a fundamental, these are fundamentals and the cores of lasting long in the sport. Because it builds your mental strength, and also it is giving you extra speed endurance. The tempo session, the real tempo session is a basic training which is holding a consistent pace. A consistent pace can be, if you are doing a 10 kilometer or a 14 kilometer training, it means that you are going to always hold on a constant speed. It could be if you are doing a 255 per kilometer.
Disregard the paces that he's saying. Everybody's got individual paces, obviously. This guy is the second best marathon runner in the world. Kenya, as a place for running, right, is very flat. And what I would like to dig into here, and I think I've got it on the next slide, is these miles here, this volume needs to be as flat as possible, because you don't want any deviations. You want a constant steady pace, like he says, but you also, because you want a steady heart rate. Do you know what I mean? You want your body not to build up speed, you want to build up efficiency. Your body's ability to bring in oxygen and use it as energy. It always comes down to efficiency. So over time, your body's going to become less stressed out by that demand, and it's going to be like, that's easier. And then subconsciously, you're going to increase the pace without even realising, to maintain this singing pace or maintain this certain heart rate. And it just creates like a weird situation where very easily you're getting a lot fitter. Do you know what I mean? It's great. It's hard to do, but trust me, it works wonders. I'll let him crack on.
250 per kilometer always.
The luck that we are having in Uganda is that when we are having a tempo session, that we can go down the mountain. So we can do it on 1,100 meters altitude. So that means more oxygen. It is also the only place we have in our area that we can run on a flat road. And because of flat road, lower altitude, the boys can and the girls can run, they can develop much more speed.
So like I said earlier on there, right, if you're running on hills, you may think that's better for you, but it reduces the quality of your miles. Unless you're doing adventure, endurance, hills develop your certain strength in, certain ways. When you go up a hill, you're using more quads. When you go in like flat, it's more hamstrings. When you're training, you need to be in control of as many variables as possible. If you're going up and down hills like a crazy lunatic, it's not steady. Another thing about 80-20, right? I don't think I've written this on the next slide. Music, like little things like music. Anything else does he say here about tempo? No, you know what? I'm going to move on. see what I've said on the next slide. So flat, so you can maintain a consistent heart rate throughout. Remember, we want these miles to be absolute quality, but not quality for your emotions. Let's be honest, flat is boring. Consistent heart rate is boring. So, but it's quality for the body, quality for the aerobic engine. Track everything. Check your pace after your session's done. What I mean by that is your kilometre to kilometre paces or your mile to mile paces, however you want to do it. Because if there's serious fluctuations where you've started fast, most people start fresh and they just bolt off for the first K or the bolt off the first mile. It's just amateur hour. Think about your gas tank. Think about how the elite runners do it. They finish fast when they're on race day. But the idea of tempo is just steady. But when he's training there, literally before I think it was Boston, he's training for Boston there, which is renowned for being quite a fairly hilly marathon. He's already got his mileage ticked off, so he's upping his speed. Do you know what I mean? Whereas what does most men do? They think they're a hero because they've just set a new goal because they're having a midlife crisis. And it's like, right, I'm going to run fast and far at the same time. Amateur hour. No amateur hour on our friggin' channel, boys. Right. Practice. Going slow requires practice. It requires you to believe, trust the process. It's delayed gratification. But trust me, you're building efficiency. You're building your body's ability to have as little stress on it as possible, so then the next day you feel okay and you can train again. So what happens is you're actually training a hell of a lot more. The obvious part of this is it takes a lot more time out of your week, takes a lot more time away from your family. There's no way of getting around this. If you have an endurance goal, you're going to have to save up your big sessions for Saturdays and Sundays. But during the week, it's difficult, especially in winter months where it's not even light. Do you know what I mean? Head torch on, get yourself out for a plod. But one of the good things is, it's easy. It's easy, but it's very time consuming. And trust me, it'll be a lot more easier than you think when you do it this way. And that's why it's so effective, because it's easy on the body. It's easy to recover from. Right, next thing I want to talk about is deload weeks. These are very important. As you start to accumulate an increased, accumulate fatigue, it's important that you have a bit of a breather. And what that looks like is, depending on individuals, age, experience, how strong you are, how fit you are, and all the rest of it. I wouldn't like to say you should be having a deload week every 4 weeks, because you might be an absolute weapon who's done cross-country all of his life. You can do 6-7 weeks without needing a deload week. So there's a few variables at play here, and you need to have the ability to assess yourself with this. When I was training brand new people like yourself, very untrained, we would run a deload week after 4 weeks of training. So the 5th week would be this. 50% reduction in volume and intensity. That would mean intensity, you could basically say fatigue. Do you know what I mean? For example, we wouldn't go on a hill session. We would do an hour swim, and we'd reduce the volume as well. So we'd do less mileage, less intensity. So yeah, you need to have the ability to have a bit of a reflect and think, you know what, I'm struggling here. Because these deload weeks are where you bank your gains. You just give your joints, you just give your bones a bit of a breather. You give your central nervous system a bit of a breather as well. And what it looks like usually, if you're all in on the endurance mission and you're on the longevity program, the long runs turn sometimes into walks, and then your fast runs will turn into slow, but a bit more strategic than that. But you get the idea. They're important. Make sure they're in, because your body will just crumble. And that's not what we want to happen, is it, geezers? Weekly mileage, the increase of, obviously, the purpose of this channel is to teach you how to do these things yourself, educate you, give you some understanding, or at the very least, you stick to better methods because you understand it. If you can create your own program, that's absolutely ideal. If you want me to do your program, then the links are on my channel and stuff like that. I can do it all for you. Anyway, weekly mileage, the endurance world's progressive overload. So no more than 10% per week. So if on week 1 you're doing 5 miles, then the next week you're doing 5.5 miles. And one thing, if this is the most important thing for you getting to the endurance level of your goal, then how you divide up, this is gold dust, how you divide up your daily mileage in order to hit that weekly doesn't matter. You don't have to do, a 5 mile run. You could do 2.5 on a morning, 2.5 on an afternoon. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to do it all in one go. Remember, the 80%, it's all about making sure that you have an easy time recovering from that session. So anyway, don't increase your mileage more than 10% per week. And what you'll see is it'll go up 10% one week, then the next week 10% next week, then you'll deload, and then you'll come back, and it'll be 10%, and then literally these numbers, and then eventually you'll be at your goal. Keep your strength sessions in, and then maybe the final month before you're doing your race, take your strength sessions out. Happy days. And like I touched on earlier on, once you get to the mileage goal, you're probably about 75% of the way to achieving the total distance in which you are racing at, but your weekly mileage is a hell of a lot more. Then you can start to work on speed. This is why it's really important to give yourself plenty of time, because most people work on speed and endurance at the same time, and it's just friggin' mental. Not usual, you know what I mean? Have I skipped a slide there? No, carbohydrates, right? Fasted cardio is lousy, don't do it. It's amateur hour. If your body needs carbohydrates, why would you go out and do a friggin' empty stomach cardio session? What are you doing? Especially when it's your rapid sessions, your 20% ones, where it's zone 5, hard, fast and aggressive. Why would you ever do that fasted? Yeah, but I feel better when I haven't had anything to eat. Lads, absolute bollocks. If world record holders are having oats before their world record marathons, 2 hours 3, 2 hours 2, 2 hours 1, 2 hours 30 seconds or whatever it is, and you're telling me you don't need breakfast, you're an absolute lunatic. Get a grip. Overall, with regards to calories, just while I'm talking about carbohydrates, a slight calorie surplus is advisable. However, if you start to move from intermediate to elite level runners, weight management may be a priority of yours, staying as light as possible. Okay, I understand. I'll give you that. So, most part, a small calorie surplus is advisable. Make sure you're eating carbohydrates around your sessions, before, sometimes during, and after. Electrolytes, obviously. Electrolytes are basically potassium chloride and sodium. It's like a little powder or a little capsule or a little tablet. You chuck it in your water, you neck it, and that will hydrate you better than water when your muscles are contracting regularly and you are extremely active and you're doing your training sessions, especially in summer months. And on your longer runs, carbohydrate drinks are advisable as well. And carbohydrate drinks could be a mix of an electrolyte blend with some sugar or some form of sugar. Do you know what I mean? So they would keep your body ticking over nicely after you start to use the carbohydrates that were in your blood, in your muscles from your previous meal. It just keeps yourself topped up. Does that make sense? We've covered a lot, lads. I said 20 minutes, I took 30. I do appreciate your time. We've covered weekly mileage is the most important thing, not speed. Give yourself plenty of time. Don't try and do it in a 20-week period like I've done with these lunatics that are joining the Paras. Honestly, the amount of injuries that come when people are training speed and endurance at the same time, and strength, and everything else. Do an assessment, figure out where you currently are. If you don't know where you currently are, then you don't know where to start your weekly mileage. You haven't got a Scooby. Do you know what I mean? So get it done. Figure out where you currently are. Don't skip your strength sessions. Like, it doesn't slow you down. If anything, it increases your demands. It increases your capacity to place more mileage on your body without injury. Make sure with these strength sessions, you probably want to prioritise lower body. Do you know what I mean? If you only had half an hour twice a week, then you probably want to make sure they're both lower body sessions. Do you know what I mean? Prioritise full range of motion, high intensity, heavy weights, and you'll be absolutely fine with that. 80% of your sessions singing pace or zone 2. 20% of your sessions as fast as possible, so that'll be your interval sessions. Proper, horrible, maxed to batter, all that type of stuff. Week by week, increase your mileage by 10%. Make sure you don't skip deload weeks. Very important, just to give your body and mind, especially your central nervous system, that breather. Because even though you're running slowly, you're still training often. You're still slapping tarmac with your feet, ankles, joints, your knees, your hips. It does have wear and tear on the body. As much as you might not feel like it is, because you are running so slow. So make sure you're having the deload weeks. Usually around after the 4 week mark, 5 and 6 week mark, you probably want to be taking a deload week after every 4, 5 or 6 weeks. Carbs are your friend. Don't skip the carbs. You need them. Like, you're not some friggin' hero. Gentlemen, 32 minutes. Aerobic edition. Thank you very much for your time. See you tomorrow.